This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth, buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
June 14, 2019. At 9:27 p.m., the county dispatcher answered a call that cut through the quiet of the night. A man was missing. He wasn't just late, and he wasn't a stranger. He was the other fiancé of the pastor who had stood at the altar only hours earlier, marrying someone else. The wedding had been flawless, bells ringing, guests smiling, the pastor radiant with vows on his lips. But while the bride clutched her bouquet, the second fiancé's phone went dead. His apartment stayed dark. His friends couldn't reach him. He had vanished on the very night his future was stolen in public. Neighbors whispered by morning. How could a pastor preach loyalty while binding himself to two? How could one lover be celebrated, while the other simply disappeared? The bride went home with a husband. The church emptied with applause. But the second fiancé left nothing behind but silence. And in that silence, one question refused to fade: what really happened that night? Michael Turner was 34, a quiet man who rarely raised his voice but carried himself with steadiness people trusted. He worked in IT at the local college, fixing broken laptops, restoring lost files, and answering late-night calls from panicked professors. Colleagues described him as reliable to a fault, the kind who never left a job unfinished. At home, his habits were simple: a porch light he switched on every evening, a worn prayer book by his bed, and a refrigerator stocked with the same groceries week after week. Neighbors said you could almost set your watch by the rhythm of his life. Yet Michael's steadiness carried a private layer few knew. He was engaged, he believed, to a pastor. To outsiders, it might have seemed unlikely. Michael, reserved and quiet, bound to a man who stood in pulpits and drew attention with ease. But Michael spoke of him with quiet pride, certain that love had finally settled into his life. He kept the engagement discreet, partly from shyness, partly from fear of judgment, but to him it was real. He spoke of building a home together, of leaving his small apartment behind for something permanent. In the weeks before the wedding, though, cracks showed. Friends noticed how often he checked his phone, how quickly he excused himself to take calls in the hallway. His sister recalled one evening when he admitted he felt anxious, but brushed it off with a half-smile and the words, "Love's complicated." At the time, it seemed nothing more than ordinary nerves. But on the night the pastor married someone else, Michael's careful world collapsed. His light stayed off. His calls stopped. His presence vanished. And the question no one could silence was this: how does a man preparing for a life together disappear on the very day the man he loved chose another? The night of June 14, 2019, began like any other summer evening, but by midnight investigators were piecing together a timeline that refused to fit. The wedding ended at 7 p.m., guests spilling out of the church in laughter, the pastor photographed beside his new bride. At the same time, only a few miles away, Michael Turner's life slipped off course. At 7:42 p.m., he sent a final text to his sister, "I'll call later." No call ever came. 3 minutes later, his phone attempted a short, aborted call to an unfamiliar number. At 8:17, a neighbor returning from groceries recalled hurried footsteps outside Michael's apartment, quick and heavy, not the steady rhythm she associated with him. At 8:30, his porch light, always left glowing, stayed dark. For a man of habits, those silences carried weight. Technology filled the gaps. His digital lock registered no entry after 6:15. The thermostat, usually adjusted before bed, stayed untouched. His car remained in its usual spot, seat positioned in the way Michael always kept it. Outwardly, it was as if he had gone about his day untouched. But the deeper investigators looked, the less ordinary it appeared. Inside the apartment, order clashed with disturbance. The bed was made, dishes rinsed, books neatly stacked. Yet one shoe lay abandoned by the door, its mate missing. A rug had shifted against the entryway as if dragged. Under the harsh glow of forensic lights, faint dots appeared along the threshold, not dust, not dirt, but something darker. On the counter, Michael's phone case rested without its phone. His laptop sat open, screen frozen mid-sentence in an unfinished email. Detectives noted no valuables missing, his watch still by the sink, his wallet on the dresser, the television untouched. Burglary made no sense. Forced entry made no sense. By dawn, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a stage where something quiet but deliberate had taken place. Detectives wrote their notes carefully, already aware of one truth: accidents tell clean stories. This one did not. This home spoke of interruption, of someone stepping in and cutting life short. And behind the silence, one name surfaced again and again: the pastor who had promised himself to Michael while pledging vows to someone else. In the first days after Michael's disappearance, theories spread quickly. Some whispered about a burglary, others swore they saw a silver sedan idling under the streetlight by his building, headlights dimmed, engine humming. A neighbor claimed she heard hurried steps on the stairwell after dark. Each idea seemed promising. Each one fell apart. Detectives pulled surveillance footage from corner stores and traffic lights. No prowler appeared, no stranger lurked. The car belonged to a delivery driver, his route logged. The footsteps lined up with another tenant returning from a late shift. And the apartment itself showed no forced entry, no stolen goods, no chaos of a random break-in. The outside explanations crumbled. As those leads collapsed, investigators turned back to the fragments Michael had left behind. He had once told a friend his lock sometimes clicked twice, as if another code had been used. He had laughed nervously when he mentioned feeling watched. Those words, dismissed at the time, now felt heavier. They suggested someone with access. Someone close. The double life of the pastor no longer sat at the edges of the case, it moved to the center. On the night he stood at the altar, one fiancé vanished while another wore the ring. For investigators, coincidence was no longer believable. By the end of the first week, detectives agreed, this was not a stranger's crime. It wasn't chance. The person who made Michael disappear was not unknown to him. It was someone trusted. Someone he had loved. Someone whose other promises that day could not be ignored. 3 weeks after Michael Turner vanished, a road worker spotted what looked like discarded clothing near a wooded ditch 10 miles from his apartment. Deputies arrived, pulled back branches, and found a body wrapped in soil and rainwater. The hope that Michael might still return alive ended that day. The autopsy began the next morning. Bruises ringed his arms, the shapes of hands pressing down. Shallow abrasions on his wrists suggested restraint. 2 ribs were fractured, likely from force applied with weight. His face showed a split above the eyebrow, consistent with impact against a hard surface. There were no drugs or alcohol in his system. He had not been numbed or sedated. He had been held, beaten, and silenced. The medical examiner noted absence as much as presence. No defensive wounds on his hands, meaning he never struck back. His arms had likely been pinned. Blood pooling in the lower body showed he had been left face down for hours before disposal. The report concluded with finality: cause of death, blunt force trauma combined with asphyxiation. Trace evidence widened the picture. Fibers clung to his clothing, navy and cream carpet strands that did not belong to his apartment but matched samples later lifted from the pastor's home. Under ultraviolet light, faint smears appeared along Michael's collar, residues from an attempted wipe down. Forensics retrieved smudged partial fingerprints on the inside of his discarded phone case, layered over Michael's own. Investigators returned to his apartment with fresh eyes. This time, ultraviolet sweeps revealed diluted stains near the entry rug, faint streaks scrubbed but not erased. A cluster of hairs recovered at the threshold were identified as Michael's, pulled by force. His half-typed email remained frozen on the laptop, words cut off mid-thought. When detectives delivered the results to his family, grief broke open. His mother wept, clutching the prayer book he had once carried to church. His sister gripped his glasses so tightly the frames bent in her hand. The confirmation was unbearable yet undeniable. This was not disappearance. This was homicide. Science had spoken where rumor failed. And its verdict was clear: Michael had not walked away. He had been taken. The autopsy evidence circled back to one man. Fibers, smears, timelines, all roads led to the pastor who had stood at an altar with a bride while Michael's body was being hidden. Detectives brought him in. At first, he projected calm. He spoke in measured tones, insisting he had been at the reception all night. But questions chipped at the surface. When asked where he had been between 6 and 7, his pause was too long. When shown the carpet fibers, he repeated, "That could be anyone's." His hands, once folded steady, began to fidget. Beside him, his church assistant was also questioned. She admitted seeing Michael near the pastor's home days earlier but later claimed uncertainty. In court she echoed herself in circles, "I don't remember. I can't be sure. Maybe I was mistaken." Her nervous hands betrayed more than her words. Investigators believed she had covered for him out of loyalty, or fear. Indictments followed. The pastor faced charges of murder, obstruction, and tampering with evidence. The assistant was charged as an accessory. Outside the courthouse, congregants gathered, some whispering disbelief, others staring in quiet anger. The man they had trusted in sermons now sat accused of betrayal beyond comprehension. The first hearings cut sharp. Prosecutors walked through the injuries, the fibers, the timeline, tying each point back to the man who had lived 2 lives. They argued Michael had been silenced on the same day another vow was spoken. The defense pushed back with words of contamination, coincidence, glitches in digital records. They hinted Michael might have left on his own, unstable, unlucky, a victim of chance. In the gallery, Michael's family sat silent. His mother wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. His sister stared straight ahead, refusing to look at the defense table. Every word in that room was heavy with grief. And as the judge set dates for trial, one truth remained: the evidence was strong, but the verdict would hinge on who the jury chose to believe. The trial began in late September. The courtroom was full, reporters with notepads, congregants sitting stiffly, Michael's family huddled in the front row. The air was heavy with silence. The prosecutor rose first. He spoke of evidence like steps on a staircase. One by one, he laid them out: Michael's broken routines, his final text, the bruises on his body, the fibers clinging to his shirt, the fingerprints inside his phone case. "This is not coincidence," he told the jury. "This is sequence." The defense countered immediately. Their warning was simple: beware of doubt. They said technology failed, fibers transferred easily, grief distorted memories. "Do not destroy a man's life because a story sounds convincing," the attorney urged. Witnesses brought the case to life. The medical examiner described Michael's injuries in clear, steady words: the ribs fractured under weight, the face pressed until breath stopped. Photos of bruises appeared on the screen. Jurors leaned forward, pens scratching paper, some unable to look away. Next came the digital analyst. He showed logs from Michael's phone and smart lock. The lock never opened after 6:15. The last call attempt lined up with the pastor's missing hour before the ceremony. The timing was too exact, he said, to ignore. The lab technician testified about the fibers. He held up photographs under magnification, pointing out navy and cream strands identical to the carpet inside the pastor's home. They traveled with Michael the night he died, he told the jury. Neighbors and friends followed. A neighbor recalled hurried footsteps outside Michael's apartment at 8:17, too quick to be his. A friend repeated Michael's words, "Love's complicated." Another described how Michael once complained about his lock clicking twice. The defense pressed hard. They said chain of custody was sloppy, fibers could stick to anyone's clothing, witnesses remembered what they wanted. They pointed to the pastor's calm reputation, his service, his sermons. They painted the picture of a man trapped by suspicion, not evidence. Day after day, the clash built. Jurors showed no reaction beyond small gestures, an eyebrow raised, a hand pausing mid-note, eyes steady on the witness box. Closing arguments brought the case into sharp relief. The prosecutor's voice rose as he spoke. Michael Turner's voice was silenced that night. But his habits, his prayer book, his porch light, his phone, they spoke for him. And they point to the man who vowed himself to two people, and destroyed one. The defense answered, "No one saw this crime." The state asks you to leap from possibility to certainty. You cannot take a man's life away on doubt. The courtroom stilled. The jury filed out. Hours stretched, then a day. When they returned, the foreperson carried a folded slip of paper. The judge asked for quiet. The verdict was ready. Everyone in the courtroom rose as the jury filed in. Faces tense, shoulders squared, eyes fixed forward. The clerk asked for the verdict. The foreperson stood, opened the paper, and spoke one word that echoed like a blow, "Guilty." It repeated again and again. Guilty of murder. Guilty of obstruction. Guilty of tampering. With each word, the room shifted. Michael's mother sobbed into her hands, her body shaking. His sister held the bench until her knuckles turned white, tears falling silently. Congregants gasped, some lowering their heads, others frozen in disbelief. The pastor sat still, jaw tight, eyes on the table. Only his hands betrayed him, fingers twitching, then clenching. The assistant, convicted as an accessory, broke into tears, whispering words too soft to hear. Weeks later, the sentencing came. The judge spoke evenly, his tone heavy with finality. He spoke of betrayal, of trust broken, of a man leading two lives until one ended in violence. He looked at the pastor as he pronounced the sentence. Life in prison without parole. The assistant received years in prison, her loyalty turned into punishment. The gavel struck once, sealing their fate. Outside, the town remembered Michael in small ways. Flowers left at his apartment door. Porch lights glowing through the night. A candle flickering on the church steps where he once sang. Detectives told reporters that evidence had spoken where Michael could not. His routines, the lock, the phone, the light, became testimony. His absence had told the truth. And as his family walked out of the courthouse, one truth lingered. The verdict was not only the jury's voice. It was Michael Turner's.